Welcome to MTM Travel. I'm getting ready to head to Hawaii to Alani, Mark, to check off another Disney thing off my bucket list. So I'm super excited about that. I'll be there next week and I'll report back after that.
So this is the 5 years in the making trip, essentially.
Something like that. I use the Delta Vacations for Universal, but staying there with my friend's DVC points, he got a two-bedroom villa. So it's nice to have friends, I guess.
Yeah, from everything I hear, like the DVC, we always talk about timeshares are a bad deal, but it seems like DVC points are usually pretty good, or it seems like a lot of people make money selling them to other people when they can't use them. And I'm sure it depends on when you got in on it and what you got locked down. It's probably more expensive now than it was 10 years ago or whatever, but it's kind of crazy that this might be the one timeshare thing that's good. And I say that, I'm sure there's other nuggets of timeshares, or if you buy them on the secondary market and you get them pretty cheap, the maintenance cost isn't too bad. You have that option. But, talking about this, my sister's in-laws have a timeshare that they pay for like 12 weeks in Florida, and it was hit during the hurricanes and everything, so they can't even go to it, and they still have to pay all the fees, which I find kind of crazy.
I feel like in this space, when you start talking timeshares, a lot of people hate them. And I think rightfully so. They are just not generally a good deal at all. You're paying some money down. A lot of people don't think about those maintenance fees that you have to pay every year. And they're like, oh, I have to pay $800 or $900 a year and I get a week wherever. And then I don't know. It never made any sense to me. DVC is a little different. I even know people in the miles and points hobby who have it. Some people who operate businesses, like you say. And for people looking for like a cheaper trip and you don't have miles and points to do it, renting DVC points can be much cheaper than just going directly to the hotel. I've seen some comparisons where it's half depending on where you get them. And there's certain websites that are kind of brokers in this so that they'll help you find, owners willing to sell them. Yeah, it can be a great deal at the right times of year, even, like half the price of what you'd pay Disney directly.
Yeah, the key is like find a friend that has them but isn't into miles and points, and you're like, hey, you give me those points and I'll book you a trip anywhere you want to go or something like that. So you can trade. And I used to do that. I know we talked about it years ago on the podcast. I had a friend that worked at Disney on the weekends. She was a teacher and then, worked at one of the restaurants or on property on the weekend. So she got free tickets, and I would book her flights home to Michigan and she would give me free tickets. And it was like, I got 4 tickets to Disney for like 20 or 40,000 sky miles, depending on if it was just her and her boyfriend, stuff like that. But like, timeshares, I think, are good for people that can't budget or don't force themselves to go on vacations. I think those are the people they're looking for. The same people that, look for a tax return every every year because they think of that as like a savings account, even though there's no interest on it and you're giving a loan to the government. It's kind of like in that same vein where, hey, I'm paying this every month. It's affordable to me. It's $100, $200, whatever it be a month. And then I know I have that one vacation, 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, baked in that I paid for. So I know I'm going to use it because I paid for it. And it's just kind of in my budget. So I think it's like meant for people that aren't really good with finances or budgeting. I mean, it's definitely a bit predatory, and depending on where you go and who you go with. But yeah, I think in certain situations it works.
And in many cases, these timeshares don't hold value. So you can get them on the secondary market for much cheaper. This isn't really the case with Disney, but with a lot of the other ones. So if they get you in a room and they're trying to pressure you, imagine just Googling the secondary market for that same timeshare. You probably can get a better deal than you would in the room getting the new one, buying one off somebody who regrets it.
Yeah, and I brought this up when I did my 15-minute timeshare presentation in New York, and they kicked me out because I said I was going to write about it. But I had done one a couple years before that and stuff, and kind of went through it all with them. And I brought that up, like, what do you guys say? I asked her direct. I'm like, what do you say if somebody says, hey, I can get it cheaper on the secondary market? She said, well, we're wise up to that. We actually we have it in our terms that we have to be offered to buy it back first. So we buy most of them back and give them the money versus letting it hit the secondary market. So some play that game. I think if you get the lower end timeshares, like the Blue Green Resorts, maybe just guessing, or like Wyndham or something like that, the secondary market or independent type thing, smaller run operations, definitely that's an option. A lot of times they're selling it for $1 because they just want to get out from under it. And I just told my brother-in-law this weekend, I'm like, hey, if you don't want whatever those maintenance fees are, and I'm sure it's expensive for his parents because it's, like months worth of weeks, not just like 2 weeks a year. I'm like, you need to write them a letter and back out of it, because if you don't want to get stuck with those fees every year.
Yeah, and that isn't a pretty standard thing in a lot of contracts that they have the first right of refusal to buy it back. But like you say, a lot of the companies, there's so many people trying to dump them, they're not able to do it, or they're just trying to maintain a minimum value, whatever it is. Probably for most people, stay away from timeshares, spend that effort learning miles and points, and you can do a lot better. The other thing for timeshares for me is, they serve a purpose. I like the sort of homey feel, and some people like Airbnbs and they like having a kitchen and that sort of stuff. But I really like hotels too when I'm traveling for the most part. I like to be in a hotel, and that's super important to me. And timeshares, a lot of times the furniture's older. It just doesn't have that same feel of vacation for me. Now, Disney, Alani, these will be a little bit different. Some of the higher end ones will be a little different. But for the most part, I want to be in a hotel.
Yeah, and I think, we're going to talk about on 20-minute travel later this week. One of the stories we're going to talk about is somebody had an Airbnb booked, in Santa Monica when the fires were going on, and tried to cancel it or move it. She just wanted to move it to an area that wasn't in the danger zone, essentially. Some of it was like evacuated around that area, and they wouldn't do it because it wasn't in the fire zone or whatever. They're less flexible, where I think a hotel or a corporation, a lot of times hotels, corporations work against us, but the one time that they do work for us is if something like this happens. I think they're more willing to, take it on the chin versus an individual owner that, is looking forward to that money. And Airbnb just seems to not have the best customer service a lot of times. That's the type of things that you give up. I mean, you get more space with Airbnb, but you also, you're losing a little bit of that finagle room that you have when you're working with hotels.
And Airbnb did reverse themselves on that, and they did eventually give refunds. But I think this is the problem. We've seen this with other disasters too, where eventually the public outcry happens, Airbnb reverses course, but they have, these chat people in other countries who are just repeating talking points. So you got to keep going past things. And, there was a disconnect where they're saying, oh, this fire doesn't meet our criteria for canceling. And again, they did the right thing in the end, but it takes time because it's not one hotel company saying, oh yeah, of course we're going to refund things in the LA area or whatever it is. I'm not a big fan of Airbnb. I'll just say it. I've had a few experiences. They serve their purpose for the right thing at the right time, but this is no way that I'm going to take all my vacations. It's just not, I don't know. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I've used Airbnb, a few times, and funny enough, I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it today or if we'll talk about it next week. But I threw out the idea. My family came up to celebrate Christmas this weekend. It was the first time we could do it and make it work in everybody's schedule. So we did that, and I brought up, hey, do you guys want to go to London and Paris, around Thanksgiving, do the Christmas market, stuff like that, do like a big family trip. I'll try to plan it, get it as cheaply as possible using miles and points, and I'll end up shelling out a ton. So that came up, and I'm looking at hotels in London. I start doing the searches, and with the two people per room rules there, and just like twin beds instead of queen, but you can't really make it work. So when you're talking about 10 people, it's like we'd probably be better off just getting a big Airbnb. And I looked at that, and it's like, for 3 nights it's $2,500, but that is a lot better than what I'm figuring out with hotels. And there's no lower end Hyatts in London or in the areas we want to be in and stuff like that. So you're either looking at booking suites or booking, multiple rooms for each family and stuff. It just gets crazy. And sometimes when you're planning something like that, you have no other option. So I'm doing it, but I'll be nervous the whole time of like last minute cancellations, all those type of horror stories you hear. Definitely focusing on trying to get a super host that has a lot of reviews, things like that, try to protect myself a little bit, but that'll always be in the back of my mind until we actually get in. And also, like, we'll get there early in the morning. They're usually not as lenient about getting in early, where a hotel you might be able to get in a bit early or at least check your luggage, stuff like that. So there are, gives and takes to this, but I know some people are all Airbnb, but I'm with you. I'm not big into it.
I don't know a lot of travelers, like people who have traveled a lot, that are all Airbnb. It's usually very casual people. And I think that works fine. And your point, you don't get the early check-in, early checkout. They all have different rules. Sometimes you have to clean things. Obviously, the fees can be an issue too. So make sure you look at the final sort of price. But yeah, Airbnb serves a purpose. And I mean, I'm glad they reversed course on that. And they get a lot of backlash, though. I will say they get a lot of hate out there for people saying a lot of what I'm saying, but they exaggerate it a lot. I definitely think it's a fine service. I haven't had any issues other than one time not being able to connect with the host to get into my property for about an hour, which was a little frustrating. But we were in Mexico City. We just went to a bar, had a beer, and we got a hold of them, and it all worked out good. But Yeah, so I'd love to hear everybody's take on Airbnb. Are you using it more? Does stuff like these fires and this story kind of keep you from it? Because I can see a lot of people out there just like, I don't want to deal with all that. I like just emailing Hyatt. I like just emailing these companies, and I tend to have a better result with it.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is even though it's a a multinational brand and stuff, you're dealing with a hotel that's in the area affected. People working there know understand what's going on. They also have some autonomy of what they're able to do, even if the rules say you can't cancel within 24 hours or whatever. If something happens, they understand and they'll make leeways there or adjustments as needed. So I think you have that where Airbnb, if you can get to the host, and maybe you can work it out with the host, but if you're just working with Airbnb's customer service, they're not in that same realm as you are if you call the front desk or you deal with the general manager, stuff like that. The host would be more likely, but even then, they might be like, "Hey, Airbnb is going to back me and pay me, so I'm not going to let you get out of this or whatever it be." So I think there's some games we played there that you wouldn't have to deal with. So it depends. I think for big groups, it's the best option most of the time, unless you're somewhere that has cheap hotels. Otherwise, I'm going to focus for my family. It's almost always hotels.
And you make a good point on the occupancy. And I think this is something that a lot of Americans, if you haven't traveled abroad, really don't understand just the restrictions on hotel rooms, especially in Europe. And in some places like Paris, they have fire code violations. So you can't even really sneak somebody in. Other places, I've done that over the years where I've snuck a kid in. It's not a huge deal. I guess it really depends on the hotel. Really fancy hotels where you walk in and there's 10 staff for every guest, you're not going to be able to get somebody past them. I don't know, but I've written about it in the past, some of the clever ways I've done it. But a lot of rooms are two people, and then even if they'll have three or four people, as you point out, a lot of times it's not queen size beds like we're used to here in the U.S. It's twin beds, and a lot of times the beds are almost pushed together, and the rooms are tiny, and it's just a whole different world. So that's something to be aware of as well. If you're traveling with bigger families, like you say, Airbnb, all kinds of thinking outside the box. I remember 10 years ago, when we were backpacking around Eastern Europe, I wrote about this at the time using booking.com because they were the only website at that time that had all the guest houses in Europe online. And then I would just find the names and then I'd go to the Facebook page of the guest house, email them directly to save money. But also because online they would only allow two people. And then I would say, oh, I have this teenage kid with us. Can we get him for free? And they would always give it. So, there's always ways around it. But it is a huge headache. Here in the US, you don't think about it. You know that pretty much every room is at least for four people.
Yeah, and like even Hyatt Place is, five people here because they have the pull-out couch and stuff. And then you look at Hyatt Places in London or Paris, stuff like that, and it's not not quite the same. You're not fitting the same amount of people in there. So that's something to consider when you're planning these big trips, which planning big trips are always a pain and trying to get stuff. And the other thing I ran into is I found flights home. I'm using Alaska for most of it, booking them in economy. And, part of that's because it's easy to transfer to them with membership rewards right now. AA was a bit cheaper on at least some of the flights, 19K versus 22.5K on Alaska. And then you have the extra fee, the $12.50 fee each way on partner bookings, which is kind of annoying, especially when you're booking for, 4 or 6 people, it adds up. But I'm doing that because I can transfer membership rewards, easier to do, easier to make or earn versus American Airlines miles. But I'm finding flights home for them, and I'm like, okay, finding 2 for my parents to Florida, finding 4 for my sister and her family to Ohio. But then you notice they're both on the same initial flight out of Paris, connecting in, I think, Charlotte. And, you're like, okay, it's searching that because I searched for 4, then I searched for 2, but if I book the 4, do the 2 go away? Or if I book the 2, do the 4 go away? And that's another problem you run into where it's showing space for everybody, but you don't really know until you get in there and do it how many seats are available unless you pay for, services and stuff like that. But you don't know where that cutoff is going to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you're booking overlapping itineraries and you're searching, basically you're cannibalizing the same space. So in that case, I guess you could search for 6 tickets and then see if just for that direct flight, transatlantic flight, that's what you would want to do. And then see if there's 6 tickets. As you point out, there are definitely tools and things like that. And I really have loved both Seats.aero and Points.me, and I still use both of those for my award searches. I feel like a lot of people come to this hobby because they're cheap. There's 2 ways. Like either you want to travel a lot and then you discover this whole world, or you're somebody who's looking for deals and cheaper ways to get things, and then you sort of get enthralled into all of this. So it's kind of like, I don't know, a lot of us don't want to pay for things, but some of these tools are incredible. And for us who have been in the space forever, just to think about, we didn't have these tools 10 years ago. It's so much better and easier now. Obviously, it's harder to get awards now because people can book them. But I just always try to remind people to not be short-sighted when it comes to tools. Try them out. Most of them have free trials. See if that will work. And if it's saving you a ton of time, if you're searching and spending hours and hours on these crazy trips and you find that those tools can save you a ton of time, certainly worth it. And, you can pay for a month, cancel. Some of them have annual memberships. I pay for Seats.Aero every year now because I use it so much, and Point.me as well. And I use them for different scenarios. And then there's all kinds of other tools too. Like you say, that could be, you could be nerdy and look at the different award buckets and fare codes, and
Yeah.
people go crazy.
Not me.
It was always too much for me. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah, and one caveat with these is that none of them are perfect. So they do help you. It streamlines things, especially if you're just like, all right, I got to get to Europe last minute. Let me find out, where I can find some awards, and you can search a lot of different, airport codes quickly, a lot quicker than you can do it individually or, via program and stuff. But they do bring back, phantom space, which happens when you search directly too at times. And they sometimes don't catch everything, or they're not searching everything. So I think it's a great tool to use, like run your award search, then use the tool, see if you missed anything. And it's like a great training exercise too, where you can get better at fine tuning your searches. And the more you search, you kind of get an idea of, where there's better award space, which programs highlight things better, which are cheaper, where to start. I always start my searches like Google Flights, just to see, what are popping up, what are my nonstop options, what are some other options that look like they have good cash prices, things like that. And then I kind of go from there, start searching the programs for those type of flights. But I always think that's a good place to start. It also doesn't pull everything all the time, but I think it pulls most stuff, and kind of gives you an idea of, all right, what am I dealing with here? If I want to fly from Detroit, what are my options? If I want to fly from JFK and then I'll get there from Detroit, what are my options? Hopefully you don't get screwed like I did if you go that route, but it happens.
Yeah, I think these tools are great for like inspiration too. If you just are sitting on the couch and you like, oh, what would it be like to fly here, or what are the things? And then like Seats.Aero is great if you're searching different routes over different days. Like you say, it gives you a good idea of which programs, which airlines are tending to have more space over time. And then you want to dive more in and go directly with them. I think now that I said how great these tools are, to your point, having the skills to go beyond that, the things that we used to have to do before the tools existed in the first place, having those skills, you're still going to be much better off, because you're going to be able to maneuver around, like you say, phantom award availability. Some of the tools don't have every airline, every program. So they are great, but still developing your skills for booking awards beyond that is definitely something you should do.
Yeah, and if you just hate searching flights, it's a good backup option. You don't want to do it, and a lot of people just rely on portals and just book through the portals because they don't want to search. And at times, like, just a cash flight is maybe the easiest. You're like tired of searching for the saver award availability. I did that for my flight down to Rio. I couldn't find anything that was decent on an award down there. I found a JFK to Rio for, I ended up paying like 63,000 membership rewards. I just booked it through the Biz Platinum 35% rebate. It was a bit higher, for premium economy, it was a bit higher than you would pay on a Saver Award. Maybe not with Delta, but a bit higher than you would like to shoot for. But I was like, I'm over this. I've spent, countless hours searching this for months. Nothing has popped. It's carnival season. I'm just going to take what I can get. And sometimes that's, a good backup plan. I do think Amex's portal is better than everybody else's. It seems to have less glitches. Sometimes it even has better prices. So if you do have a business platinum, always remember that that's an option, at least for the airline that you select, and then business on anything else. So there's potential there at times too.
There are two kinds of people in this hobby. Ones that just love searching award space. We know some of those people. They've created award newsletters and services, and they do it for a living for other people. They just love it, and they can't get enough of it, and they live in these programs and these systems. And then there's people like us that it's a necessary evil, but I do not enjoy the process of booking. I wouldn't want to do it for other people. It's fine for my own trips and even for family, but yeah, it's not what I love to do, even though I've been forced to kind of learn it. So it's so interesting when you meet people, and I'm always envious of the people who just love it because they're living in it and they're finding
Yeah.
some of the cool deals before we are because we're relying on them to tell us, or I don't know. It's super crazy. People like Spencer, I just think about like he just envelops himself in this world, and that's why his newsletter is so successful. Another product that I do recommend as well.
Yeah, Spencer, Thrifty Traveler has a program like that too, and they send out alerts. I've never signed up for one because I don't travel that way. You travel more that way than I do. Like I don't let deals dictate where I want to go. I'm like, hey, this is where I want to go. I'm going to search, and it's easier if you have a window of opportunity. And the problem I'm running into for this trip is we have to fly this date, and we have to be home by this date, and you maybe have a little bit of wiggle room by a day or two, but it's not like let's go to London. All right, we have 3 months over the summer to figure out when it is. And like if I could fly on Thanksgiving, I could get business at a decent price, but we want to fly out the day before Thanksgiving, so it's not as good there. But if it was just the four of us, I would fly out on Thanksgiving and book that business class. But since it's 10 people, we want to have enough days there. I want to make it worth it. If they're spending some money to do this, I want them to feel like they got value out of it. Where I don't mind going somewhere, as going to Asia for 4 days. I don't mind going for a shorter trip when you're using miles and points, where they're, spending some cash and stuff, and it's a different beast. So that kind of traps you in. So yeah, if you can be more flexible, you definitely will have a better luck of it, less frustrating, but that's not reality all the time.
Let's pivot on to some other topics. We wanted to talk about Melio really quick. They're a partner of the channel. We have an affiliate relationship with them, but they also have a really great offer that we haven't talked about in a while. Wanted to remind people that it's still there.
Yeah, Melio offer is still ongoing. If you've never had a Melio account, this is as good as you can get out there. It's only available to certain affiliates with them, and we're lucky enough to be one of the few that have it. But what you do is this is a business to business platform to send payments to people that don't take credit cards. Let's say you're a landscaper or certain water departments, things like that. Yeah, different government entities don't take credit cards sometimes. They're still in the 1990s or whatever. This gives you an option to earn some points for those payments. It does have to be a business to business. You can't make financial industry payments, so you can't pay a car loan if you have one for your business or whatever. So when you sign up, you do have to have a business to sign up. But if you make those payments, you can now use your credit card. There is normally a 2.9% fee, which could make sense depending on things. If you're working on a welcome offer, definitely makes sense because you're making more than that. If you're working on a spending offer like a Hyatt free night cert, it might make sense for you. Things like that. If there's ways that you can do better than the fee, it's definitely a useful tool in the future as well. But there's a new offer. You get $200 cash back, which they'll reach out to you after a couple weeks after you make your payment. You do have to make a $2,000 payment. So with the fees, that's about $60 that you'll have to pay in fees, but you get $2,000 in credit card spend that you would have maybe gotten otherwise. And then you get the $200 back. So it's a $140 win, and you're set up for an account that you can use going into the future. Maybe helps you out, get some sign up bonuses. Even if it's something you can use, like let's say it's a utility bill that you can pay with a credit card. To knock this out, to get the bonus, it might be worth doing it anyway, eating that fee, coming out $140 ahead. If you sign up using our referral link, we do get a kickback, but it's a great way to support the channel. If you've ever, gotten value from this entertainment, this is a way that you're going to make money. You're going to get a service that's useful, as well as you're going to support us. So I really encourage you, if you have never used Melio, definitely sign up. If you want to support the channel in a way, this is a great way to do it. It helps us out immensely. Listening also helps. The ads do not pay much. So this is a great way that you can say thank you to Shawn, myself, Joe, and everybody else that's spent time on the channel.
On last week's show, you talked all about your trip to Asia, and I suggest people go back, listen to that, watch that. A lot of great information in there, a lot of laughs, but on the ground information, you talked about your flights, your hotels, your takeaways from a super quick trip. If it comes down to going to Asia for, 4 days or not going at all, I think people should do it. I've done quick trips like that. But you wanted to talk Phuket. We talked about Thailand in general, but you didn't go to Phuket. And it is probably, other than Bangkok, people talk about that. But I think as far as other tourist destinations in Thailand, Phuket probably number 2 and not my favorite place in the world at all.
Yeah. Before we get into that, I forgot to mention, we had talked about the first day, staying up all night and then going to breakfast and we were, into it for a bit and kind of rowdy, a little bit loud, order some drinks. One got knocked over and stuff. So anyway, I said this will come into play later, but we had so much to cover. I forgot to circle back around to it. But funny enough, we're at the Hyatt Regency in Bangkok, and two breakfasts later, so our third day there, go down to breakfast, and the young lady that's going to seat us takes us, and this is a massive breakfast area. There's a ton of people working there, seating all over. She seats us down, and she's like, what would you guys like to drink? Everybody orders. One note I should make is if you order a soda or pop, depending on where you live, if you order like a Pepsi or whatever, they charge you for that, which I find crazy. If you go up to the 27th floor where it's the lounge, you can grab a soda for no charge. But for whatever reason, you can get like a tea, you can get a coffee, an espresso, all that stuff, no charge, juice, everything. But if you order a soda, you get charged like $2. I don't know. I don't get it. But so anyway, I think I ordered an espresso, and she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, no alcohol today?"
Oh God. They saw you coming. That's service though. They remember you.
Yeah. Well, she was the one that had to clean up the spill, so I felt terrible about that. We took care of her and everything, but it was just funny. She had a big smile on her face. Everybody at the table started laughing. I was like, "No, not today. That was a one-time thing." But it was so funny that she remembered a couple days later. Probably seen hundreds of people since then, and I laughed. Memorable experience, but no, that is service. And one of the guys we were, staying at the hotel with has spent a lot of time at that hotel. The general manager recognized him, came over, and was like, "How was everything?" And we're like, "Well, we did order, espresso, but it's been 20 minutes. We still haven't gotten it." And he went and got like the drinks himself and brought them over. It was kind of crazy, but very cool.
Thai service culture is next level. And it's funny because if you had a server in the US tell you that, they're probably doing it in a snarky way, like, "Hey, don't spill all the crap again." But
Yeah.
she was just doing it in like a lighthearted way. I could already tell you that because I've been there enough. And they just want to help. It's a great service culture, always a smile. You talked about how friendly the people are, but it does feel good. I don't know. I hate saying being served in that way. I don't mean it like that. The interactions feel good. It feels like they're happy to have you there. And I guess that's the way it used to be here, but I don't know. Service culture in the US has changed so much that sometimes you feel like you're an inconvenience to the people where, you're there and you sort of remember that it's not like that everywhere.
Yeah, I think it definitely used to be better in the US, especially in like small town areas and stuff. And now they're just so overworked, and they're like, "You should be thankful that I'm even here working the job," which, they have a point that's true to a point, but it's also like, "Hey, I'm spending money, I'm going to tip you. That's a big part of your pay. Like, it should just be better." And it's not. And we talk about that on the Vegas show all the time of how Vegas has really, really changed in service culture. It used to be early 2000s was great service culture and never had an issue. Everybody was super happy and enjoyable. And now it's like you notice it when you get somebody like that. But yeah, everywhere in Thailand, we did have one woman that was upset when we asked for split checks. But at the end, we each tipped. We said, "We'll take care of you." We each tipped her, and she was like, "Oh, all the money, money, money," and like smiling and showing the money. It was funny.
Yeah, it's super weird. In Vegas, a couple weeks ago, I was walking into this restaurant to film it. It's the Vanderpump restaurant. And I talked about on the Vegas show how friendly they were, but they were so friendly. And the reason the reason it stood out to me so much is because you just don't see that friendliness anymore. It's not about somebody serving you or you paying them or any of that stuff. It's just about being decent human beings. And I was a server for many years. I treated everybody the same, whether they tipped good or not. We had some regulars, like old customers who didn't tip well, they tipped $1 each or whatever it was, still treated them great, knew it all balanced out in the end. And yeah, it doesn't seem like that's the case. But when you travel, you do get to see that still, which is super nice. And I'm not going to trash servers in the US. There are definitely still great servers, definitely still great service, but it's just like they want to know what they're going to get from you ahead of time before you get the good service, which is, I think defeats the whole purpose sometimes.
Yeah, it's expected to go over 20% now a lot. And usually I do anyway, and I did before, but just the expectation, like if you give 20% and the service wasn't great, they like or like, oh, okay, that, and that it just like it gives you apprehension before you go in there, like, oh, how's this gonna go and stuff. And the one that really drives me crazy is when you go in and order the food and you pick it up, you go sit down, you clear your table and stuff, and there's still like a tip asked, and it's right in front of you, and you have to sign or push the button, and it's like, ah, it just feels like this was never asked before. Maybe there was like a jar, you put a couple bucks in there, but it's gone over the top a bit, tipping culture. I know we talk about that all the time in the U.S., but it does seem that way, where in Thailand it wasn't expected. It was very appreciated when it did happen, and 10% or more was like an amazing tip for them. And if it was great service, give even more than that. And they just were so happy and always said thank you for it, no matter what the amount was, which I thought was really cool. But circling around to Phuket, I remember you saying you didn't love Phuket, but I couldn't remember if it was, I know you had like a terrible hotel experience there at a Hyatt, and I don't know if it was that or just the whole area. So I wanted to dive a bit deeper. We didn't have time last episode.
So Phuket is this giant island with multiple towns. So instead of it being like one area that you go to, it's very spread out. So there are beautiful 5-star resorts all over the island. I'm sure they're really nice. The beaches in Phuket are not very nice. They're full of trash. They're just not great. There are a couple good ones, but again, it just depends on what area you are. But yeah, I had the Hyatt Regency. So the first time I was in Phuket was in 2008, and we stayed at a nice hotel on the beach. We were backpacking, so I stayed in the Phuket town in like a hostel or something, and then we found a great deal on like a locally owned hotel on the beach. It was pretty fancy for like $70 a night back then. It was fine, but even then, like the low tide, you would see all the rocks exposed, so the beach wasn't very pretty. But anyway, a few years ago, went and stayed at the Hyatt Regency. It's the only Hyatt I've ever walked out of. I ended my stay early. I know that we talked about it on some old podcast, or I wrote about it too. I don't want to rehash everything there, but I was lied to by management. They tried to switch my room around. The whole place was falling apart. There was like exposed wires in the pool. The hotel pool sits over a road, and then across the road is this very tiny beach full of trash. But the road goes 1 foot away from the pool, and it's full of trucks all day. So if you're sitting in the pool looking out at the trash on the beach, you have trucks literally driving by you. And these are Thai trucks, which, it's still a developing economy. So think about the exhaust fumes that are coming from there. It finally came after a couple of days. They tried to resolve things, and they offered me a free night. I'm like, I think we were supposed to be there 4 nights. On the 3rd day, I went to the manager. I said, this just isn't working out. We're going to leave. And then we went and got a villa. And, talking about Airbnb earlier in the episode, we got this private villa for less than what the cash price of the Hyatt was per night. I was paying with points, but and it had like private pool and spa and like 2 bedrooms, and it was this insane thing. So that was great. But the Hyatt Regency Phuket, do not recommend that. The location is just terrible. The resort itself is okay. It's built on a hill, so you need golf carts to get anywhere, because if you're up on the hill, it's you'd be hiking like crazy to your room. But the service it's crazy because the regular staff was great. The managers were all lying. It was just this huge thing. Got back home. This is the only time I've ever done this. I emailed my concierge, all this stuff. I sent her pictures of the pool, which again had exposed wiring in it. And she's just like, well, you have to deal with the property. And I said, look, I'll go up as high. I just want my points back. I'm not going to pay for anything that happened at that hotel. We had to leave. We had to go find something else while we were in Thailand. This hotel should not be a Hyatt. They did give me all my points back, but that's the only time I've ever done that in all of the Hyatts I've ever stayed at. And like I said, if you're going to Phuket, avoid that. I think Koh Samui, I haven't been there, but I've heard it's better. And there's other smaller islands. Like I love the Krabi area, and there's some nice resorts over there. The landscape with the big limestone things that coming out of the water that you've probably seen is all in that area. Koh Phi Phi, where they film the beaches down there. Like these are all better alternatives than Phuket. My biggest comparison would be Cancun. It feels like Cancun. The way they treat tourists in Cancun? That's the only place in Thailand that you'll be treated like that as a tourist, and it sucks.
It's also rocky beaches in Cancun, so that's kind of funny. Like, the beach is not a thing in Cancun, or at least on one side for sure. So it's kind of funny. But no, my one buddy, and you also know him, lives like 20-30 minutes north of Phuket in the smaller town. He loves it up there, and I think the beaches up that way, he said, are much better. So if you can venture out from the town area, I think you'll be better off. But there's so many beach areas in Thailand and stuff. And I know you've said some of the most amazing beaches you've ever seen are in Thailand, just not in the area that most people go to. So definitely a country I want to explore more, and definitely areas to go to that I think, that most people haven't been, is where the specialty is at, and everything. So I do want to go back, especially with a local that kind of, well, somewhat local, been living there a couple years, driven all around the island, has the island as well as all around mainland Thailand, has a good idea of where to go, where not to go. I think that would be really unique. And anytime you can make friends with somebody that lives in an area, they're a wealth of information. Be sure to use it. I know whenever somebody comes to Detroit or Michigan, they ask me, I'm sure the same for you when they go to Vegas, like, hey, where should we go for this? Where should we go for that? And that's the best way to do it. And these group meetups and everything, you meet people from around the country, from around the world, and you get those type of tips that you're not going to get from TripAdvisor or just Google searches, things like that.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, I totally agree with you. There are definitely redeemable things about Phuket. And if you went and stayed in one of the 5-star resorts and went on a few tours, you would love it. I mean, so it's just a different side of it. My biggest point is I've been to everywhere around there, and everywhere else to me is just better. Like smaller islands, like one of my favorite experiences was staying on Koh Sakorn, which is not an island anybody's ever heard of. It's just this little island that had like 2 8-room resorts and 2 towns full of people. And we were on that island, and it's like we had it to ourselves as far as tourists go, and got to live with the locals. So there is so much to do in that area. So my biggest point would be, if I'm going back and I'm in that area of Thailand, in Southern Thailand, with everything they have, I would choose elsewhere. But I can certainly see why people like it. And I know a lot of people will have great experiences. I met somebody at some point at a meetup who loved the Hyatt Regency Phuket. I don't understand that. I don't understand that at all. I don't care if the room was perfect. I don't care.
Kicked him out?
The fact that you have the fact that you have a truck
You're
driving
out.
by you and you're breathing in exhaust fumes all day and looking at trash on a beach. And by the way, the beach across the street is about 5 foot of beach. It's not even a real beach. There is a beach about 10 minutes away in town, but it's not great either. Yeah, I don't know. But I certainly understand that. Your point about having friends and locals, that makes everywhere better. And there's not a place on this earth that's not worth visiting with somebody who knows it and can show you that side of it. And in the end, Phuket is still Thailand, and you're still going to get great Thai people giving you service. It just feels more predatory, more overrun with tourists, where you can go 20 minutes from there, 30 minutes from there to some of these other places and not have that.
It does make a world of difference. And it just, comfort level too, is somebody that understands the local customs, maybe understands the language a bit or a lot, especially if you're internationally. But even like, if you go to parts of the US, it could be a completely different culture, a different experience. Like you might not understand what things are okay and not okay. It could be different compared to where you're from and stuff. And also like everybody has local cuisine. What's the good local cuisine? What's the bad stuff? What will you like the smelly fruit in Thailand? We didn't try it. Eric, our buddy, tried to get me to do it, and I was like, you know what? If it smells like feet, I don't want anything to do with it.
It tastes good. Tastes good. Durian.
You're one of 2 people out of like 30 that have told me it tastes good.
It does. I mean, it's not the best fruit I've ever had, but it's certainly good if you can get over the smell. It does smell, though. That's one of those few things in life that actually lives up to the hype. People talk about durian. I had heard about it like when I started backpacking, and I'm going to Asia, and you read about it everywhere, and you're like, does it really smell as bad as everybody says? Do they really have signs and like in Malaysia in hotel rooms telling you can't bring the fruit in and open it in the room? Yes, they do. And yes, it smells that bad. It really does. It's just a very unappealing smell.
Yeah, when you're treating a fruit like it's smoking, I mean, that's not great.
But they love it too. They love it there, which is crazy about it. Like the locals, I mean, they absolutely love that fruit. It's not like, I remember years ago being in Singapore, and McDonald's had a durian smoothie. So that just tells you how much that flavor
Gross.
profile is popular there. I'm sure they made it good. They sweetened it up with a lot of sugar.
I'm sad I didn't have time to go into a McDonald's on this trip. And I try to, any country I go to, I try to go into one, even if I don't eat, maybe grab like a Diet Coke or whatever and be on my way. But I want to just look at the menu and see what the unique things are. And I think it's cool. Everybody, always lowbrow shames you or whatever. Like, oh, you went to a McDonald's while you're in Asia or you're in Europe or or whatever. Yeah, I want to go in there and see, what different kinds of sauce dips do they have? What different kinds of sandwiches do they have? I think it's just so cool to see how they, make their menu match the local stuff. They still have the regular things for the most part, but it's always fun to see the unique stuff they have offered at each one.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of taken off with social media. I know I see a lot of that stuff on TikTok and stuff where people are showing their local McDonald's or their local thing. And we talked on the last show about how you can't get good beef in Thailand or things that taste like that. But believe it or not, McDonald's burgers taste like McDonald's burgers in Thailand. So that's actually not a bad option if you're looking for that. And it just depends on how much you travel. If you travel on one week a year and you're on a vacation, you probably should eat the local food all the time. I mean, but maybe not. Some people just don't like it. If you just like McDonald's and you're still willing to go take in a culture and travel, I think that's great. What I've done over the last few years, which is a little quirky, is I've noticed Taco Bells have expanded, and I don't eat Taco Bell at home very often at all. I prefer Del Taco. That's more the reason than anything. But I've eaten Taco Bell probably in 9 or 10 countries now, and I like it. It's just my thing. I've eaten it in China. I've eaten it in Thailand. They have one in Bangkok. I've eaten it in London. I've eaten it in Scotland, a few other places that they have it, Singapore, way back in the day. And I don't know, it's a cool novelty. So now for me, when I see, as McDonald's not really a thing for me, but Taco Bell, if I see one, I'll get it. Yeah, so I could keep going on. I've had it in Seoul. Who knew there was Taco Bell all these places?
What is it? Is it Japan where KFC is really big on Christmas because they before social media and stuff, they faked it into thinking that all Americans eat KFC on Christmas. So then they started, and you have to order a month out and everything, which is now I want to go there. Everybody talks about the 7-Elevens, but I want to go to Japan and get KFC just to see what this whole thing is about. I know it's mainly focused on Christmas, but it has to be more popular than expected because of that.
I think part of the Christmas stuff in Japan now is because of Disney, honestly, and Halloween. But you're right, they do that. And so if you go to Japan, they celebrate Halloween, they celebrate Christmas. These are holidays that are not traditionally ever celebrated there. And because of Disney, maybe it's not because of Disney, and somebody can correct me, but Disney bringing the Christmas stuff there, it's very cultural there now too. And so it's not just that, oh, we're not Christian and we have no reason to celebrate Christmas. They celebrate the whole season of Christmas in Japan. And it's no religious reason. And I think it's a really neat thing. And it's a real interesting cultural exchange in how they do it. And you're absolutely right about the KFC. I've seen that. I've seen stories about that as well. You wouldn't believe in China, how popular KFC is in China. There's more of them than McDonald's. But yeah, it's weird though, to think about. You're traveling all over the world and there's American culture everywhere. You can't really escape it. And yeah, I mean, when you go into a McDonald's, who's eating there? The locals. It's generally the locals. There'll be a tourist or two, but they're not staying in business off of white people going to Thailand. They're staying in business because the Thai people like McDonald's too, every once in a while.
I know when we were in Mexico City, we wanted to watch some college football. We were hoping that it would be on the TVs at Chili's. So we went there just for that reason, had a couple drinks, tried to watch a game, but there was a big football or soccer match going on. So it was just packed with locals watching that, and it was kind of an out-of-body experience. I'm talking about no seats anywhere, completely packed Chili's, all with the local people there watching the football match, just like it would be in the U.S. It was kind of a sight to be seen.
And people are raging in the comments. You're in Mexico City eating at Chili's. And yes, it tasted like Chili's and it was good. And we had plenty of tacos the rest of the weekend and plenty of Mexican food and no regrets on eating at Chili's.
My toilet felt all those tacos when we got home too.
So that's going to do it for this show. Let us know in the comments whatever you guys think about what we talked about. Timeshares, are you guys into that versus Airbnb? What are your best tips for that? Share those. Maybe we'll share some of those on a future show. Everything else we discussed on this show, leave a comment. Next week, we'll talk Alani and Hawaii, all of that stuff. Don't forget to check out 20 Minute Travel on Wednesday for all of the news from this week's Miles Points travel space. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you next time.
Have a good week, everybody.